Well, I just want to say congratulations to all of our graduates. I want to once again say congratulations, Ronnie. Congratulations, Jessica. Congratulations, Tony, the three high school graduates here out of the church. And also a little shout out to my buddy James, who just graduated from Princeton. And anybody else who happens to have just graduated, what an accomplishment that is. And I'm excited for the future as it lays before you. And I would just like to actually pause right now and pray for you before we go any further. Would you pray with me? God, I just thank you for all these that have worked so hard through high school and those who have worked their way through college and have aspirations for the life that lies before them. I pray that you would use each one of them in an incredible way, that you would create opportunities for them and that open doors, and that your favor would rest upon them as they seek to follow you and your will for their life, and that they move forward and live up to the full potential that you've given them to live. God, we just thank you for them and ask for your blessing on them. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, I want to welcome everybody to today's service and also let you know that we're kicking off a brand new series today called Focus. And the premise of this series is really that we move in the direction of the things that we focus on. And when I was in high school, I was kind of an avid bike rider. In fact, my brother and I in high school, one day we took out on a Saturday morning on our bikes from Aloha, and we rode all the way to Hag Lake, which was a 20-mile ride. Then we rode the 10-mile loop around the lake, and then 20 miles home, a 50-mile ride. But one of the things I learned in high school when I was riding, I learned this early on, someone taught me this, that when you're on the side of a road and there's no like bike lane, it's just the shoulder of the road, and it's kind of dangerous, especially when you get out on those country roads where cars are whizzing by at 45, sometimes up to 55 miles an hour, that you're always conscious of where the car is behind you if you hear a car coming up. And so if you look behind you to see where the car is, what I was taught is that if you look over your left shoulder towards the road, that your bike will pull towards the cars, which is not what you want. And so I was taught that you actually want to look over your right shoulder. It's actually better to have the little rear view mirror on your helmet. I wasn't fancy enough to have that. But look over your right shoulder because you will lean in the direction that you're focusing. That's true, I think, for our lives, that whatever we're focusing on the most, it begins to expand in our life. And that's what this series is all about. It's really about learning how to focus on the right things. And I think now more than ever, in the current season, the current reality that we live in, we need to be focused on the right things. I think this is a very timely message that we need to be working through and thinking about and focusing on the things that matter most so that we will move towards them. And so that those things are the things that expand in our life. The author Paul in the New Testament in Romans chapter 12, he says this as he's writing to the ancient church in the city of Rome. He says, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." See, that's what we want. We want to focus on the things of God, the things that are higher, the things that are worthy of our thoughts, the things that are worthy of our focus, so that God can change the way we think and we can be transformed to being people that are doing things that are good and pleasing and perfect. And that's really what we're talking about here in this series. This message that we're talking about today, I originally was planning on talking about this one a few weeks down the road. In fact, you may have heard us say that we are aligning our adult topics with the student, or actually the kid topics, the elementary and preschool kids. And it's kind of cool. It's the first time we've ever done this, but the kids are also going through a series called Focus. And we were lining up our topics, and really this topic was slated for the end of this month, but I think because of all that's going on right now, it was a better time to be able to talk about this one right now. And I'll also warn you, if you're a parent, I kind of diverted this week, probably a little more than I will in other weeks, a little bit away from what they were talking about. They're going to be talking about a really cool story about this guy named Peter in the New Testament who kind of had some biases against the Gentile nation, the Gentile people, and God helped them overcome those barriers. And so they're going to be talking about that. I won't give it all away. But we're going to be talking today. I titled today's message, "It's Time for a Change." Because I really believe it is time for a change. You've probably heard this before. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And I think in our culture, if we want to see a change, something has to be different. Because if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, we're going to keep getting the same result that we keep getting. And that's frustrating, and it's also insanity. I've also heard it said that if we want something we've never had, we must be willing to do something we've never done. And I think that's the current season that we're in. So what I'm sharing today is universal really to all situations where you're trying to solve problems or work through situations. It's really universal, but I really want us to focus through the lens of where we at currently in our culture, all that's going on with Corona, with civil rights and the things that we've seen happen the last couple weeks unfolding with the riots and all, it's just everything that's going on. But I will tell you this, out of all the times that I ever prepared to speak, this is probably the most difficult time I've ever had preparing a talk. And the reason is because usually when I'm getting prepared for a conversation with you, I'm drawing on experience and education and knowledge and things that are kind of already built inside of me, and I'm just kind of putting them together and kind of organizing those thoughts to be able to share them with you. But this one, I really felt like this is not an area that I'm educated in. This is not an area I really have a lot of experience in. I confess, when it comes to civil rights, man, I've never had to deal with prejudice or racism in my life, my family, my kids, my wife. That's like foreign to us. And so this whole concept is something that I feel like I had to kind of educate myself on even a lot this week. And I felt like in a lot of ways I was starting with a blank slate, a clean slate. And so it's been a challenge for me. And I also say that as I was preparing, I spent a lot of time thinking, a lot of time praying, and really just trying to learn and understand. And so I come to you today as I speak with humility. And what I'm saying, I know I will probably say something wrong because this is new territory for me. And I'll tell you this, that my heart is to try and serve you and try to help give you direction on how you can follow a better way, the way that God wants us to live our lives. And I would ask for your grace in this process, because I certainly will probably look back myself and be shocked and horrid of some of the things maybe that I say or the way I present stuff, because I really want to make sure that you hear my heart on this, that I really do desire to try and lead you down the right path. And so as I'm sharing, I want you to look through that lens. And as we're talking today, I just want to give you 3 suggestions. As we look forward to the situation we're in, we're talking about focus. And I want us to be focusing forward. Let's get away from the past, and let's get away from the muck of the present, and let's focus towards the future. And as we focus towards the future, I just want to have 3 suggestions for you on how we can operate in moving forward. And the first one in your notes, if you follow along in the notes tab, is this. Number 1, we need to listen. When you're ever faced with a problem or you're faced with a situation, the first thing we should do is listen. If you remember 2 weeks ago, I was talking and I offered you a suggestion that there was this book called 3 Seconds, and when you're ready to react or respond to somebody that's angered you or upset you, that it's wise to pause and wait for 3 seconds before you respond to them, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of compose yourself and think through before you react. And I think the same is true in the situation that we're in right now. Instead of just instantly reacting and having like a shooting from the hip and having knee-jerk reactions, we need to pause and listen before we move forward. I know you probably have the same experience, but if I go to the doctor, sometimes he pulls out this really funny hammer with this like little triangle rubber thing on the end of it, and he'll tap my knee right under my kneecap just right. And when he taps my kneecap in just the right spot, I have no control over my knee. My knee just shoots out, and my foot kind of kicks out. We call that a reflex. And I think the most unhealthy way that we can respond in our current situation is just to have a gut level reflex, just kind of fire off and shoot from the hip when we're ready to respond. We need to stop and listen. In James, the author James in the New Testament writes this in James chapter 1, 19 through 20. He says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be," listen to this, "quick to listen, and don't forget this, slow to speak and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." And I believe a lot of times when we just respond reflexively, or we respond too quickly without really pausing and listening, it can be just like that reflex response, and it can create us to we can be quick to get angry and quick to talk through what we should be listening and listening to what someone else is telling us. And I've learned this as a valuable lesson in other aspects of my life. I think of parenting. And I think of even in the last 8 or 10 weeks with my kids being at home and, we're cooped up together, that there have been moments, my poor children have just been trying to communicate something to me, but I was so frustrated in the situation that I just had a gut level response. I reflex response to them, and I just started talking over them and telling them like it is, and I didn't stop to listen. I got myself in trouble, and I have to go back and apologize to my kids for being rude and for not listening. And a lot of times what they were getting ready to say was not what I thought. And I had to kind of have humble pie and say, you know what? I responded the wrong way in that situation. And I've learned that. I've also learned that in my marriage, that one of the best tools that I have in my marriage belt is to listen. And I've learned this a lot with my wife. I hear this is true of most women, that there's 2 kinds of conversations. There's the kind of conversation where where my wife is asking for my help to solve a certain situation, but most often when she comes to me with what I see as a perceived problem to solve, is she's just venting and kind of flushing out what she's feeling, and she just wants a listening ear, someone who understands her. And I am so quick to say, well, here's the 3 things you should do, and just jump in and tell her like it is, tell her what she needs to do. And it's so frustrating for her sometimes when I don't even listen to what she's saying. I'm hearing the words, but I'm not listening. And so I'm just reacting with what I think she should do in the situation. And I find those gets me in trouble. And I think this is also true in our situation. I see so much as I'm watching social media and I'm watching the way people are responding to the current events that have unfolded, is that people aren't pausing and stopping to listen and seeking to understand. There's just this gut level response, and most often it's an angry response. And I understand why, but I also know that it can get us in trouble, and it's not the healthy way for us to respond to these situations. I heard this silly story years ago about this guy. He was driving down in a neighborhood, and as he approached a house, there was another gentleman who was trying to get a stove through the front door of the house, and this guy, being the Good Samaritan, quickly pulled his car off to the side of the road and ran up the sidewalk to the front door and quickly tried to help him get this stove through the front door. And after about 5 minutes of both of them just working really hard to try and get this thing through, and just sweat pouring down their face, the guy who had stopped to help this gentleman trying to get the stove out of his through the front door said, "Man, we're never going to get this thing out of the house." And the guy says, "Out of the house? I'm trying to get it in the house." And if it's a silly illustration, but if only you'd stop long enough to understand what the other person, where they're coming from and what their their approach is or where their perspective is, it might change the way you try to help them. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is if we don't stop to listen and we just react, when we mean to help, oftentimes we're just hurting. We're not actually helping the situation. Here's my suggested step when it comes to this idea of racial diversity and racial inequality that we're dealing with right now, and the discrimination that has surfaced. I think one of the best things that we can do in this time is to pause and listen and seek to understand each other. And if I'm a white person, a white dude, and I do not understand a lot of the issues that my African American brothers and sisters deal with or have dealt with in their past. And I think one of the best things that I can do, and I challenge you if you're in the same category as me, is that you reach out to somebody that you know, that you trust, and have an awkward conversation and say, "Tell me your perspective in this situation. Where are you coming from? What have you had to deal with? What does this do for you? How is this situation coming across you? And what would you suggest as a way that we could move together, locked arms, united, how we could work on this to solve this, to move forward together?" The other night, our family was at the grocery store, and there's this wonderful African American lady who works at the store. And every time I see her, I'm kind of excited that she's the one that's there, because when we get to the front of the line, we'll always have a conversation. We remember each other and we talk. And how are you doing? How are you doing? And so there's been a couple times during the last few months where that's happened. But I approached her on this evening a couple nights ago, and I asked her. I said, "So how are you holding up?" And the tone was different this time. And she said, "Oh, I'm doing all right." And I said, "Are you doing okay?" And she kind of sighs and she says, "Yeah, I'm doing all right." She goes, "It's kind of crazy what's going on right now." And we kind of talked for a second about what had happened this last couple of weeks. And my wife was there, and she looks at her in the eyes and she said, "Are you doing okay?" And she kind of changed, and she said, "Yeah, I'm doing okay." She goes, the men who did the wrong, they've been arrested. But she said something that struck me. She said, "But who knows if they'll actually get convicted." And I thought, that's interesting, because in my mind, the fact that they had been arrested was pretty much the justice has been served. But she's seen so much injustice in that area that she's in her mind saying, "I don't know if it's going to happen." And then she wanted to say, "And if they don't get justice in that situation, I fear for our country and the rioting that's already happened, how much worse it's going to be." And I thought, wow, that's a perspective that I didn't have before. And if we stop long enough to listen to each other, we're all coming from a different place in this situation, but we all, I think, want to be on the same team and want to be on the same page. If we listen long enough and seek to understand each other, I think that'll go a long ways as we try to move forward and focus on moving forward and making a positive change into the future. One of our next steps today, by the way, is to seek to listen, to understand what someone else's perspective is. And if you don't maybe feel comfortable with that conversation, or you don't know who to talk to, we actually have some resources in the notes. And if you want to click on one of those links, we've provided 3 really amazing videos that I think would be helpful if you want to kind of seek to understand in this situation. And I highly encourage you to check out one or more of those. I know one of them that I checked out was super, super enlightening for me. And so I encourage you to do that. So first thing we do, if we want to be part of the solution, is that we must first listen and seek to understand. And the second thing in your notes that we need to do to focus forward is that we need to reflect. It's not enough just to listen. That's great. That's a great starting place, but we need to pause and reflect. Once we've listened, once we've taken in, sought to understand, we kind of brought this information in, now we have to digest it. And we have to reflect and process that. We need to spend some time wrestling through the issue and not just jump and go, well, we heard things, and now we just move on into action. You got to wait. You got to wait for a second. You got to process that. There's a story in the New Testament, and for me it's a little humorous. I don't think it was humorous for the guy involved, but this guy named Peter, one of Jesus' closest 3 disciples, was known for shooting from the hip and kind of putting his foot in his mouth from time to time. And there was a situation where Jesus had just shared with his disciples that he was going to die for them. And Peter didn't like that one bit, and Peter actually took Jesus aside. Can you imagine doing this, taking Jesus aside? Peter takes Jesus aside and starts to reprimand him. This is what Matthew says. He starts reprimanding him, saying, heaven forbid, this is never going to happen to you. That's what Peter's saying. He's like, that's never going to happen to you. Listen to Jesus' response, because Peter shot from the hip without really thinking through what he was saying. Jesus turned to Peter and said, get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. See, he listened to Jesus. He listened to what Jesus had to say. He heard him. But then he didn't pause and process that and reflect on what Jesus said and even ask the question, if Jesus, the God of the universe, is telling me he's going to do this, it's probably a good thing, even though it doesn't seem like it, because he is kind of God. And maybe I would have a different response in that situation if I paused long enough to reflect and think that through. I don't know if Peter ever had remorse for just kind of firing that off, but that's what happens when we don't pause long enough to not only listen, but to reflect on what we hear. We need to spend time in reflection. And we should also, by the way, when we're in time of reflection, this is a great time to lean into God for wisdom and discernment. It's a time to pray, a time to get on our knees, a time to call upon God. And I'm not just talking like a flippant or like under the breath kind of prayer, but I'm talking about the kind where you just pour your heart out to God. Because in these situations, we really need to depend on Him and lean into His wisdom. Wisest man who ever lived in Proverbs 28 says, the evil do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand everything. And Solomon often liked to contrast good and evil and foolish and wise, and so it's kind of a very extreme statement. He says that those who seek the Lord understand everything. I don't know if I feel like I've sought the Lord. I don't think I've understood everything, but I do know this, that when we seek the Lord, we do gain understanding. I do know that. I've experienced that over time and time again, over and over in my life. Reflection turns experience into insight. And when we've listened in a conversation and we reflect on it, or we've gone through an experience and then we reflect on it, evaluating that allows us to turn that experience, to turn that information into insight to help guide us as we move forward into the future. That insight can inform the decisions as we decide what we need to do, how we're going to take action. See, it's during this time that we begin to process our response. In fact, this past week, you guys, probably heard me say this before, but I don't watch a whole lot of news. I every once in a while get online and check things out when I hear about some big stories. And I heard about George Floyd midweek last week and thought, well, that's an awful situation, but didn't think too much of it. I didn't know much around the story, the context of it. And then someone had talked to me close to the weekend, and I thought, I probably should dive into this a little bit and figure out what's going on. And so on Saturday, I really began to understand the gravity of the situation and what had taken place and what had happened. And I watched the video that was very difficult. Didn't even get through the whole thing because it was so difficult to watch. And I chose not to address this last Sunday because I don't think I was prepared or ready to. In fact, some even asked, hey, are we going to talk about this on Sunday? And I said, I don't think it's wise for me to do that because at this point in time, I haven't had time to process this. I haven't had time to really evaluate it. And man, to try and steward the leadership that I have of the church well, I don't think it's wise for me as people are listening to me for advice to just kind of fire off from the hip. I need to really have time to process this. And so I chose to wait and begin to process it. And it was interesting because I kind of felt like in a fog all weekend long about this. And I was just kind of wrestling through it and trying to figure out what do we do? What do we do with this? How do I direct and how do I lead people through this? And the interesting thing was the more I processed it, the more I thought about it, the more I talked about it, the more I I researched and sought to understand the situation. And the more I called on God and prayed, and I actually reached out to other people and asked them if they would pray for me for wisdom and discernment. It was interesting as the week progressed how that fog began to lift, and I began to see clarity on how I could respond to this situation and how I could move forward. And I think a lot of times, if we want to take action appropriately, we got to pause long enough not only to listen, but to reflect and to process what we're basically trying to decide what to do with. So sustained thinking, I believe, beats smart thinking every time. I know there's some smart thinkers who sometimes they're very witty and very quick, and they can fire off and have these sounds like really smart responses. But I think if you can stay the course, you don't have to be like the most intelligent, smartest person in the world. If you just kind of be processing and thinking through what's the correct response, what's the appropriate way to respond in this situation, how do I move forward? That you'll begin, it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare, that if you slow and steady stays the course, that if you continue to process this, that you're able to think through and come up with, I think, an even more appropriate response to the situation. It's kind of like, if you ever watched, I drive by fields where there's cows out there and they're chewing on the grass, and you just kind of see them and they're just chewing. Like every time you see a cow, it seems like they're chewing. And I think that's what we kind of got to do. You just kind of chew on that for a while and just spend a little time and let it kind of get soft and mushy in our mouth before we move on and decide what we're going to do. So I think the more that I think it through, the clearer that things become. And that's what I've seen happen over and over in my life, is that if you fire off too quickly, a lot of times you're going to regret that because you've made the wrong choice because you made it a rash decision. So first thing we got to do is listen. Second thing is that we need to reflect. And then it's time to take action. We need to take action. You see the progression there. First, we listen and seek to understand. Then we pause, we reflect, and we process, and then we take the action. And I want to point out to you that as I've talked this through, I don't want you to give the idea that you just sit there and hold off and wait forever, and you like rarely take action when you need to, because a lot of times the opportunity passes if you don't take action when the time arises. And so it reminds me kind of like, and by the way, I'm preaching to myself on this because I'm a perfectionist. I want things to be just perfect. No one can find fault what I'm going to say or do before I do it. And a lot of times I've learned you just have to say or do what needs to be done, even though it's not perfect. You've got it close. It's good enough. And I think it reminds me of kind of like the old military command, for soldiers: ready, aim, fire, a safe way to shoot their weapon. And I think a lot of times if we don't stop long enough to listen and reflect, it's really a kind of a ready, fire situation where we don't actually pause to aim. And that can always lead into something bad. We don't want that to happen. But there's also another danger on the other side of that, which is ready, aim, 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 and you never get around to actually firing. And I think that can also be equally as destructive and damaging if you don't take action. So realize this, and this is kind of how I began this talk off, is that I may get something wrong as I'm talking to you, but I can't wait forever to have this conversation. We need to have it. And it's okay if I make mistakes, because I can learn from those mistakes and I can correct and I can get better for the next time around. In fact, I heard this really cool progression it's called the cycle of success, which starts like this. Basically, you try something, then you fail. Inevitably, we're going to fail. We're human. We're not perfect. You fail. You learn from that failure. You make improvements based on your learnings, and then you re-enter. And then as you re-enter, hopefully it's better the next time around. It's a better version of what you did. And you see this take place in the work world, like when they're putting out software and something doesn't work, and they revise it and they put it out and keep doing it. So that cycle really works. And so once you've re-entered, you're going to make another mistake. So then you pull out, you realize where the failure happened, you learn from it, you make improvements again based on what you learned, and then you re-enter and you keep that process going. And that's maybe, for me at least, helps kind of relieve the pressure that you have to get it right the first time. And so when it comes to acting and maybe not knowing how you're supposed to move forward in this current situation, what's my next best step as it relates to showing love to the people in our community and to help in this racial divide that we're dealing with, what's my next step? Maybe you don't have to get it perfect the first time. Maybe you can take action once you've listened and reflected appropriately. You can take action and mess up or fall down, wipe yourself off, get back up, learn them from your mistakes, improve, and then move forward. See, action creates traction, and if we want to move forward, we're going to have to put things into action. It's kind of like a boat or an airplane. You can't turn a boat or an airplane while it's stationary. It has to be moving for that to happen. In a car, same way. You can turn the wheels of the car. The wheels are going to turn, but the car won't turn unless it's in motion. Action creates traction. It's also important to note that change, if we're talking today about being a time for a change is only going to happen if we take action. And I love this quote from William Arthur Ward. He says, "The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, but the realist adjusts the sails." I think we need to stop complaining about the situation that we're in. We need to stop expecting that somehow it's miraculously going to change optimistically. We just think positive thoughts it's going to get better, because it's not. And we need to adjust our sails, figuratively speaking, to the situation that we're in and capture that wind and move forward in the direction that we need to move. And I've got 3 helpful guides that I want to give for you on how to take action that I think are helpful in kind of informing your decisions moving forward. But before we talk about them, I think it's important to keep in mind as we prepare for action what Paul says in Romans 2:11. Number 1, that God does not show favoritism. And then James 2:1, James says, "My dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim to have faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ if you favor some people over others?" So there's the lens that we look through. God does not show favoritism. And James goes as far as to say the strong statement, how can you even say you have faith in God if you're favoring some people over other people? So with that in mind, here's 3 helpful guidelines I think that we can follow moving forward. Number 1, in your notes, is to live out the golden rule. We need to live out the golden rule. You've heard the golden rule before. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. It's interesting that every culture and every faith system has some version of the golden rule built in. Universally, we all know that one of the best things that we can do is to treat other people like we would want them to treat us. And we see that in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 12, that Jesus says, "Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets." That's a pretty strong statement. He says, this is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets, to do unto others as you wish they would do to you. The second thing that I want you to consider as you're thinking about how to take action in this situation is to love unconditionally. We need to love unconditionally. Jesus says in Matthew 22, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself." And listen to what he says here. "The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these 2 commandments." These famous words of Jesus have been known to be called the Great Commandment. They're the greatest commandment. And if someone came up to Jesus and said, "Jesus, summarize Scripture up, like give me the Cliff Notes. What's the most important thing?" And Jesus didn't hesitate. He responded back with 2 basic statements. Love God, love others. We need to love others unconditionally. Jesus also, in the words of John recorded in John 13, says, "So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other." Then he goes on to say, "Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." If we want to prove to the world that we're followers of Jesus, if we want to show them the hope that we have and what Jesus can do in our lives, we do that. We prove that to them by the love we have for each other. Satan will use division as a tool against us. We must stand united. I really truly believe that love is our greatest weapon. God commands us to love one another. And it's that love that shows people that we're followers of Him. The third and final kind of guideline I want to give you to inform your decisions as you try to take action in this current situation is to lead by example. We need to lead by example. We shared this just recently, and I think it bears repeating, so I put it in your notes again, but there's this story in the New Testament about how Jesus washes His disciples' feet. And after having done that, Matthew records Jesus saying, "And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet." He's saying, I am demonstrating for you how true leadership is, servant leadership happens. And now that I've done this, I want you now to go and do that for others. And Jesus led by example, and we too need to lead by example. You've heard me, if you've been listening the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about this thing called All In. It's a spiritual journey where we say for 2 years, what do we focus all of our attention for 2 years on each of us taking our best next step towards spiritual health and growth and growing closer to what God wants us to be. And we designed this tool. I've been talking to you for the last several weeks that's called a spiritual assessment guide. And really on here, we outline 6 basic habits that if you follow these habits of connecting, serving, Bible reading, prayer, giving, and sharing, these are foundational cornerstone habits that will help solidify and strengthen the foundation of your life as you grow closer to where God wants you to be. And I've told you that I want to each week for 6 weeks talk through one of those habits. And this week, week 3, we're going to talk about sharing. How do I share my faith with others? And am I strong in that area? Am I weak in that area? Is there room for growth. And I put in my notes here just a couple ideas that I was thinking of. Number one of the easiest ways that you can share your faith is simply by sharing this link to this site where we watch these services every week and we connect together in community and we have an opportunity to grow. Because if no one hears the message of Jesus, it can't help them. And we promise every week to be providing value and to be sharing the love of God with everybody who tunes in and introducing them to Jesus, the one who can save them, the one who can change their life, the one who created them. And so one of the best things you can do is simple. It's just to share when we put it out there that you can tune into the services, share those posts and share this link to this site with the people that are closest to you. And then when you're having conversations with people at the office as you slowly get back to going to work again, or you run into a neighbor on a walk or whatever, is invite them. And I've done that with several of my neighbors and invited them, and I had a couple tune in because it's just an opportunity, a really easy opportunity to be able to share what God's doing in our life. And I think probably one of the more powerful ones, but it's a little bigger step, it's a harder one, and that is actually sharing your faith with someone that you know. And that can be tough. It may feel intimidating. You may feel like, I don't know how to do it, I don't have all the answers. But really, sharing your story is just telling what God has done in your life. You don't have to have all the answers. You're just sharing what God's done for you. In fact, Peter, in 1 Peter 3:15, he says, if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. The question I have for you on this habit of sharing your faith is, if someone were to ask you about your hope in Jesus, are you ready to share it? Are you ready to explain why you have hope in Jesus? Do they see a difference in you that's attractive, that they would want that in their life as well? And so this guide here is just an opportunity for you to rate yourself and to be looking for opportunities to improve in that area. We've even given you on this sharing guide this really handy tool where you write down the 5 people closest to you who, if you were to invite them to come check out one of our services, or if you were to talk to them about faith, they would be the most likely people to be interested or to listen and say yes, and write their names down, put this in a prominent place, pray for them every day. Pray for opportunities to serve them, to show love to them, and then when the opportunity arises, to invite them to church or share your faith with them. And so that's just one great way that we can lead by example. I think as I've watched, and this isn't just in the last couple weeks, I've been watching leadership in our country over the last 6 months to a year. And in a lot of ways, it's disheartening to me to watch as there's leaders in positions of power and positions of authority and influence that really shouldn't be there because their character isn't there. They're not strong and leader. Maybe they've got a gift of getting people to follow them, but they're not necessarily leading them the right way or using that gift in the right way. And I think that there's a great deficit in our country of good leadership. I believe that our leadership is largely dysfunctional in America. And I heard this recently. I thought this was a really great eye-opener for me, at least, was that when good leadership is in place, it unites friends and divides enemies, rather. But when there's dysfunctional leadership in place, it divides friends and unites enemies. And I see a lot of that happen. There's so much division, so much divisiveness. You've heard me say recently that now I disagree with you means I hate you. It seems like so much anymore that we've kind of, from the top down, led this idea that where it's all about all for me and what do I want, what can I get, and it's just this very dysfunctional thing. And I was thinking this week, what is something that I can do, me personally, just talking to myself, what's something that I can do right now that can be part of the solution, part of changing what we're in today. And I became very convicted this week that I believe because there's such a deficit of leadership in our country that I want to do my part. And for me, I want to create something called the Leadership Roundtable. And really, what it is a group of people who are like-minded, people who want to make a difference, people who believe that they can be part of change, people that think that they can help make or raise up other leaders and can influence other people by leading by example. And really, a leader, a person who leads is just someone who influences. And if you're a parent, you're an influencer of your children. In fact, a lot of times, children are the leaders in the home because they influence the parents to do so many different things. And leadership essentially is just influence. So don't be intimidated by that word. But if you are somebody who says, yeah, I agree with you, Mike, I want to be part of making a difference. I want to help change the leadership culture in America because it's not going the direction it should go because there's just been too much dysfunction. And I think it starts with us. It starts right here. You can talk about how it's such a big problem, but I believe it starts right here with us. And if we can change our own life, then we can change our family. then we can change our church. Then we can change our community. And that begins to pour out, and eventually we can change our world. And I really believe passionately that leadership is a huge part of the answer to this problem. And so I'm creating this thing called Leadership Roundtable. It's going to be one of our growth groups. It's going to meet on Wednesday evenings at 7 o'clock. In fact, it's next step number 3 in your notes. And if you would like to be a part of that, if you want to take action, this may not be for everybody, but if you are serious about changing your world through leadership and being a part of spotting and developing new leaders and sharpening your own leadership skills and all of us becoming better as leaders together, I would love to have you be part of that group. And in fact, I'll go as far as to say getting to be a part of any group is a great way for us to lead by example as we get together in community and we unite together as one and we show the world that they can know that we're followers of Jesus by our love because we are connected in community. And I encourage you to check out the group's catalog and get plugged into any number of groups that are the ones that work best for you. So as we wrap up today, I want to remind you that the 3 steps that I talked about are first, number 1 is to listen. Once you've done that, spend some time in reflection. And once you've had an opportunity to reflect enough to be able to come up with a response, it's time to take action. Don't be fooled today into thinking that this conversation and this issue does not affect you. It really does. Because it's not a political issue. It's not a law enforcement issue. It's not a legislation issue. I believe firmly that this is a theological issue because it goes straight to the heart of God, because God is love. God does not show favoritism. Diversity was God's design and God's idea. God created it. It was his way of creating variety and color and interest. And God wants us to embrace that diversity, not to shun it. There's one of Jesus' disciples, John, in the latter years of his life, and he had a vision, and in that vision he saw heaven. And he describes it this way. He says, "After this I saw a vast crowd, too great to count." Listen to this. "From every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb." See, when you go to heaven, you're going to see the great diversity and the grand diversity that God designed when we go to heaven, because God loves everybody. He created everybody. He loves everybody equally. I want to close with the words of Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. We are tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are all in this together. We need to stand united as one with the love of God, demonstrating to everybody how a better way to live." So I challenge you to do that. You know, if you're listening in and you've never made a decision to follow Jesus, the one who created the 7 billion people on our planet who are all different and unique, the one who loves variety, the one who made you and designed you exactly the way he wants you to be, the one who values you, that's priceless. If you want to make a decision today for maybe the first time to say, "God, I believe in you. I want to follow you. I want to be one of those who is known as a follower of you because of the way I live my life with love." And so today, for the very first time, I'm giving my life over to you. I'm just going to say a prayer in a moment. And as I say that prayer, I invite you to say along with me as a way of saying, "God, today, from this day forward, I give my life to you." Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for saving me. I believe in you. I believe in your life, your death on the cross for me and for my sins, and your resurrection, conquering death. Please forgive me of my sins. Fill me with your Spirit. Lead me and teach me to follow you. And I ask this in your name. Amen. You know, I don't normally do something like this, but today I wanted to do something different. I think as we wrap up today, I thought one of the best things that we can do as a group united together is to be able to spend some time focusing on the one who created diversity, the one who created us, leaning into him, to worship him, to call out to him, and allow him to speak to us and to work through us. And so I'm going to play a song that you probably don't know. What I'd like you to do is maybe listen to the words of this song and just spend time listening and reflecting and getting close to the heart of God and worshiping him during this time. It's called Heaven's All Around. was blind, and now I believe. You tore down the walls to keep us apart. What seemed like the end was only the start. Heaven's all around, heaven's all around, Jesus is near. I can see it now, I can see it now, your kingdom is here. Heaven's all around, heaven's all around, Jesus is near. I can see it now, I can see it now, your kingdom is here. All that we've seen, still more to come. We know you'll finish what you've begun. And battles may rage, but we will not fear. We know our victory is standing right here. Oh, heaven's all around, heaven's all around, Jesus is here. And I can see it now, I can see it now, your kingdom is here. Whoa, heaven's all around, heaven's all around, Jesus is near. And I can see it now, I can see it now, your kingdom is here. Come and move how you want to. Come and make the old brand new. Come and move how you want to. Do what only you can do. Come and move how you want to. Come and make the old brand new. Come and move how you want to. Do what only you can do. Come and move how you want to. Come and make the old brand new. Come and move how you want to. Do what only you can do. Well, come and move how you want to. Come and make the old brand new. Come and move how you want to. Do what only you can do. Whoa, heaven's all around, heaven's all around, Jesus is near. And I can see it now, I can see it now, the kingdom is here. Oh, heaven's all around, heaven's all around, Jesus is near. And I can see it now, well, I can see it now, the kingdom is here. Come and move how you want to, come and make the old brand new. Come and move how you want to, do it only you can do. Come and move how you want to. Come and make the old brand new. Come and move how you want to. Do it only you can do. Would you pray with me? God, as we think about your kingdom and the beautiful diversity that you intend for it to be comprised of, help each one of us to be very conscious this week, to do our part, to bring up there, down here, that the kingdom of heaven can be experienced all around us, just like that song talked about, because you are near. You are here. We know that if change is to come, that it'll come only through your power, through us uniting together, and for us to do our part. And God, that's what we want. Help each one of us this week to be intent on doing what you've called us to do. We thank you for this. We love you. In your name we pray. Amen.